Good morning. I am Duane Alexander Miller. I serve as the associate priest at the Anglican Cathedral of the Redeemer in Madrid, and also professor of Old Testament at the Protestant Faculty of Theology, also here in Madrid. I am talking with Terence Ascott. Can you please introduce yourself to us a little bit? You are the founder and the president of SAT7, but tell us a little bit about your life and who you are.
Oh, well, I'm a civil engineer by training. I went to the Middle East for a one-year short-term missions program with Operation Mobilization. I think it was about 48 years ago. I decided to stay another year and then another year, and I never actually went back to engineering. Got involved in Christian publishing. That was the first 20 years, really, of my life in the Middle East, including time in Lebanon. And during the Civil War, I moved to Egypt, where we published a newsstand magazine that was sold in 12 different Arab countries on the newsstands with Christian values and Christian allegory and content. And then in 1989, I was deported from Egypt over human rights issues. And this kind of freed up my whole time to focus on developing a television ministry, which eventually launched in 1995. We formed a partnership of agencies and churches and went on the air with just 2 hours a week in May 1996. So it was a hard transition for me to move from print to television, but we can talk about that later, because I'm a skeptic when it comes to television, and I'm a great believer in the print media. But the Lord has blessed the work, and it's opened my eyes to the plight of Christians in these different countries, Iran, Turkey, the Arab world, North Africa especially. And it's been just an amazing learning experience for me to be involved in the ministry that, as you mentioned, is called SAT7. Over these past 25 years.
Great. And I had the privilege of giving a couple of chats or a couple of talks on the topic of pilgrimage, just theologically, historically, biblically, for Turk7, which is the Turkish division, I guess, or branch of SAT7 one time when I was in what is today the city of Istanbul, but people who know church history would recognize it as Chalcedon. So.
Yep.
Great. Well, you have a new book. Tell us about the new book and what inspired you to write this book.
Well, it's called Dare to Believe. It's available through Amazon. It's 300 pages, which is a lot. I mean, I wanted to put much more in the book, but the reason for writing it was really to document some of the exciting things that God has done through the ministry, but more importantly, to make our readers aware of the Christian presence and an amazingly rich history of witness and bold witness across the Middle East and North Africa. It's funny how Westerners don't even know there are Christians in some of these countries, and the word like Palestinian Christian is an oxymoron to most Americans, sadly. So there's some amazing people that I've met, that I've read about, been introduced to, that I wanted to share some of their stories in the book. I remember reading when I was 20, God Smuggler by Brother Andrew, and it really opened my eyes to the needs in Eastern Europe and gave me a handle on what I could do to help. And I spent my next 4 years of holidays going in and out of Eastern Europe with literature. And I hope, in a way, this book can do something similar, that create an understanding and perhaps a compassion and a commitment by people to pray for or to help in some way the church in the Middle East and North Africa.
Great. Who should read this book?
Well, of course, everybody, but who should read it? I think people that have an open mind about the Middle East would like to know more about it. That the Middle East for many people just means Israel. They don't know what's around it. But there's 600 million people in this region, in the Arab world, the Turkish world, and the Persian-speaking world. some of them are living in terrible situations. Some of them are a very small number, perhaps 4% are believers or Christians by birth even. But we need to be aware of them and to support them in our prayers. Some of them are amazing people. And I think it would be a blessing to readers as they discover these people and hear their stories. It will be really inspiring for them.
Great. So one of the things that you do in terms of the organization of the book is focus on some of the different language groups, the Turkish ministries, Arabic ministries, and so on. Let me ask you, do you see any, and you share, encouraging stories about good things that are happening in those different areas. But when you look at the larger Middle East, do you see any particular area or ethnic group that is particularly resistant to the Christian message, to the gospel?
Well, I suppose some of the more wealthy individuals in the Gulf would be that way, although the experience of wealth doesn't lead to happiness, and people are discovering that. If I can flip the question, there are some amazingly open countries, and I would put Iran at the top of the list. I mean, the responses we've had to broadcast into Iran has been just totally amazing. And recent survey, I don't know if you saw that one that came out of Holland a year or so ago, that showed the huge number of people that have lost all trust in religion. It indicated that there's possibly 1.2, 1.3 million converts to Christianity now in the country. And the hunger there is for authenticity, for peace, for hope, for meaning in life has opened the door to the gospel in a way that never happened under the Shah or even in the early days of the revolution. Turkey too is going through some significant changes. There's a increasing deism, a belief in God, but they reject the kind of abusive Islam that has been pushed onto them by religious leaders, including now the president and so on. North Africa, I mean, Algeria, you're working very closely to North Africa yourself. It's a very exciting story. Despite the ongoing oppression of the church in Algeria, there's amazing things happening, and believers there are just an inspiration to us all.
Great. Yeah. When I was doing my doctoral research, I had the privilege of spending quite a bit of time with some Iranian believers in the diaspora. And I didn't mention it at the beginning because it's such a small community, but I am one of the co-pastors of Kanisa, which is the Arabic language Christian church here in Madrid. And I would say roughly half of our contacts are, come from a Muslim background. And a lot of them come from North Africa because Spain is just so close. So we're definitely seeing that too here. Do you think, and I'm asking this question because you have a number of stories of kind of persecution and pressure placed on believers, especially from a Muslim background, not only from a Muslim background, but especially in your book. Do you ever think that there will be complete freedom of religion in the countries of the Middle East, or at least a couple of them? And let me clarify for people watching from the States, in most of these countries, your religion is on your ID card. So just the idea that, well, you change your religion in your heart, but then, okay, yes, that is definitely important, but if you can't change the religion on your ID card, that has to do with everything from who you can get married to what names you can give your kids, to where you're going to be buried, like all sorts of stuff that is very important and touches on even day-to-day aspects of life. So I have to insert that because a lot of my American friends are like, well, if Jesus is in your heart, what does it matter? I'm like, well, it does matter. So here's a question. Do you think that any of these countries are going to have complete and full freedom of religion, where a person can go in and legally change their ID from Muslim to Christian?
I hope so, but there's not very many encouraging signs. as you look across the map. And I'm glad you pointed out that each of these countries is so different. I mean, sometimes we people in the West kind of lump the Middle East all together, but each of the countries are as different to each other as the countries of Europe are. And generalizations generally don't work. But yeah, I don't know if we're going to see that kind of real change in the future. Certainly not in the near future.
Thank you. So one of the things that I appreciate about SAT7 is that it manages to be recognizably Christian and gospel-centered without being sectarian. So it's not like we are, fill in the blank, the Baptist channel, or we are the, Coptic Orthodox channel. How did you manage to do that? We tried to do that with Kanisa here. I mean, we are recognizably, I guess, within, broadly speaking, a Protestant broad tradition, but we welcome people from all sorts of different churches. And I feel like with us, sometimes that's a tough line to negotiate. How have you done that with the ministries of SAT7?
How long do we have? A day or two?
Let's go ahead and go for about 5 minutes, give or take.
I think there's been so much misunderstanding between denominations. I mean, I remember when I first went to Cairo, I met this priest, and he was a nasty man. He kept trying to get money from me, and very difficult man, Coptic Orthodox. And I could easily have dismissed the whole Coptic Orthodox Church on the basis of that one meeting. And we do that. We meet a terrible Baptist, we don't like Baptists. We meet this extreme Pentecostal, we don't like Pentecostal. Unfortunately, this is human nature. But I was also blessed to meet some amazing, godly bishops in the Orthodox Church who just exuded the love of Christ. This changed my attitude, changed my mind. As I got to know people from different traditions, I discovered that, yes, there's some dead wood, but the Holy Spirit is working and alive in all these churches. I mean, you can't dismiss 2,000 years of church history in Egypt. You can't ignore the fact that the Egyptian church suffered terribly under waves of persecution from Rome initially. I mean, the Coptic calendar dates itself from the great persecution under the Emperor Diocletian. So we can learn so much from our brothers and sisters. And I think working ecumenically, that word ecumenical is so discredited because of the extreme craziness of the World Council of Churches, perhaps in the 70s and 80s. But really, it doesn't require us to give up anything of our own beliefs. We can believe, hold on to what we think is precious, but we should be at least willing to listen to other Christians, because no denomination has a monopoly on Christian truth. And we can learn so much from each other, and we can grow together. In the case of SAT7, yes, I'd spent a lot of time building trust with different church leaders, but they came around a project that they could all agree was important to do. We came up with some guidelines on the basis for joining a theological statement. I mean, one of those was the Lausanne Covenant, which may amaze you to know that most Orthodox and Catholics will accept as being a legitimate, if not complete, theological statement. They don't disagree with any of the contents. And various other documents like the Nicene Creed. And we came up with some programming guidelines. We never attack our audience. We don't attack another religion. We present the gospel in a positive way. That doesn't mean we can't address criticisms of Christianity by Islam, for example, but we don't attack anybody. We don't get into politics. Having got all these documents worked out in harmony with the different churches, it became quite easy for us to move forwards. So it's been a great missiological experiment and a great learning for many of us involved in it.
Thank you. Thank you. So let me ask you a nuts and bolts question here. What does it look like from there's a TV program on SAT7 and somebody sends an email or sends a text message in and has just some questions. They're not polemical questions. They're not saying, I want to convert, but just, I have some questions. What happens with that process? And what does it look like for them to be put in touch with a local church, or is that not something that you do?
First of all, I have to say that this is an evolving situation. We're getting more into digital media. We just appointed a digital media director, and hopefully we will work with lots of local churches. If somebody contacts us, it's more than likely going to be through, well, depending on the country, but say from Iran, through Telegram or WhatsApp, and we will respond that. We can send them materials. We get requests for a Bible. We get people who need counseling. We get just basic questions about the Christian faith. We get concerns about persecution and how to address it. There's so many things. In fact, right now we're handling over 1,000 different interactions with 1,000 people a day across the 3 channels. So I think the pandemic has done 2 things. It's gotten people more at home to watch more television, so our audience has grown, but it's also raised questions of life and death that have raised other questions through to our program producers, to our counselors, to those that handle the phone calls, the different social media posts and so on. So there's not a simple answer, because each team, I mean, the Iranians have got a very different structure to the Arab team that's split between several countries. And certainly the Turkey team handles a lot of its own stuff, but also outsources it to a third party that does some of the Bible correspondence work in Turkey.
Great. You have a number of stories in there about the joys and the difficulties of running a business in the Middle East. I particularly enjoyed the story about being in Cyprus, and then Cyprus all of a sudden decides to, take money out of everyone's bank account. And and when I think of Cyprus, I've been there for a conference, and I just think of beaches and the nice little Irish pub and the old Orthodox church. But so you had a different experience, I guess, although, but right now in the missiological world, BAM, business as mission, is a very large idea that it's understandable, right? As churches in the West, they are getting, I guess, contributions, you could say, for foreign outreach, cross-cultural outreach. They're trying to figure out other ways of funding Christian outreach. So what would you say, as someone who is not only a president and a founder, but a businessman, right? What would you say to people who are looking at business as mission in the Middle East? I want to go to a country, I'm going to start a business, I'm going to make money, and that is going to be my income. And also while I'm there, I'm going to share the good news with the people around me. That sort of overall idea. What would be your advice for people who have that goal?
Well, again, it depends on the country they're going to. I mean, there are some tremendous opportunities still in the Gulf for business as mission. I'd say there was very little, maybe for teachers or something in North Africa. Egypt, maybe there are certain openings there, and they have what's called the Khawaga complex in Egypt, which means they give difference to foreigners, which opens doors for you to witness to the upper echelons of society very often. So Turkey is very different too, and Iran, well, I mean, that's a whole other story. So I'm not quite sure how to give general advice, but obviously you need some language. You need certainly some cultural sensitivity that can come through living in the country, or through living in a country where you can make mistakes because you're going to move to another country when you're ready to start work. But do plug yourself in as much as possible to local Christian communities, whether they're official churches or underground churches. And that way you'll have someone to guide you and help you, and you will be able to help them with a wider perspective. And also it's somebody you can bring your contacts to, because ultimately when someone makes that life-changing decision to become a follower of Christ, they're much more comfortable discussing it in their heart language. And so it's very important that you have these relationships within the Christian fellowships wherever you are. But that's just a beginning.
Yeah, and I know, again, I ask questions about the Middle East, but I'm very aware that every country and even regions within countries can be very different. But I think overall, you've given us some good insights. Learn the language, make sure you have connections with the local Christian community, and get to know the particularities of your own particular country that you're going to be living in. I remember once talking with a young man who wanted to go be a cross-cultural worker in Turkey. And I asked him if he'd read anything about the Ottoman Empire. He said, I'm not very interested in history. So I thought, oh, brother, God bless you. You know. Great. Well, Terence, thank you so much. Is there anything else that you want to add? Anything that you want to say to people who are listening to or watching this interview?
No, just to stress again, if you're unaware of the bold, wonderful Christian witness of Middle East Christians across the region, you're missing something very enriching. So try to read some of these books, including Dare to Believe, that will introduce you to the believers of the Middle East today. They are an inspiration and a blessing. And the West needs to be blessed by knowing their stories. Thank you.
Amen. And thank you as well. And just going back to something you said at the beginning of the interview, and I think I just want to reiterate this, reading this book will help people to know how to pray for different believers, different communities and churches in different countries. So that's an important thing, instead of saying, oh, Lord, bless your work in Egypt, to have some more concrete ideas. Well, again, this is Duane Miller. I'm here in Madrid with my wall of art from my 10-year-old daughter behind me. So people always wonder about that. That's what that is. And I'm speaking with Terence Ascott. He is the president and the founder of SAT7. And can you show us the cover of the book again? He has just recently published this beautiful book, Dare to Believe. So please pick that up. That's available in Kindle format and also in print format through Amazon or your local bookseller. Thank you so much, Terence.
Thank you. Great to be with you.